Hello, anybody who's there yet, and we'll say hello again later on, but thank you for joining us. And to start with, Tatyana, hello.
Hi, Georgie.
It's been a while since we had a good catch up, isn't it? So
it's been a while, which is a good sign.
It is. And thank you for getting in touch and offering to do this, actually, because I know people have really enjoyed the previous ones that we've been doing. And so you know yourself how helpful it is, isn't it? Listening to recovery stories, listen to other people and giving them an opportunity to ask questions from you, I think has been, really helpful for many people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do you want to start by just telling us when you started having any symptoms, when you first aware of them, although often we then become aware that we had symptoms in the past anyway, but when did any pain that you had become a problem for you?
So it was somewhere around summer 2015, and before I started working with you, Georgie, I was suffering from low back pain at that time for over 2 years.
Right.
It started in the left sacroiliac joint, SI joint, out of the blue. It was just after my usual workout in the gym. For the 2 years after that, it was just getting worse and worse. I stopped exercising, and sitting, standing, walking, like doing normal things was literally unbearable, especially sitting on a chair, which seems to be so simple. I was in pain like 24/7. It occupied all my mind all the time. Of course, I was angry, depressed, tired, hopeless, and I was just 32, the best age to enjoy life. I can talk a little bit about what I've done before to you, just to
especially if you're hurt yourself in the gym. The assumption is, or if the pain comes on in the gym, the assumption is that it's something you did physically that would cause the problem. So not surprisingly, you go down the physical route.
That's exactly what I thought, because I was lifting weights, and the pain didn't come straight away. I went to work because I exercised before work. I went to work on that day, and I sat down, and the pain came out of the blue. And of course, I thought I hurt myself, definitely. And the pain didn't go away for a week. So, of course, I booked an appointment with a spinal surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done all MRI scans, blood tests. I got opinions from 2 different spinal surgeons. They couldn't find anything serious. A little bit of wear and tear in the left sacroiliac joint. And of course, when I heard this diagnosis, my life was finished. Yeah, because I just pictured vividly what exactly happened in my back, which was a huge mistake, as I found out later.
So imagine, sorry to interrupt, but imagination, visualization can be so positive and powerful in this approach in our recovery, but actually it just shows how powerful it can be when it's not helping, because you can imagine your spine degenerating and falling apart or crumbling or whatever.
Yeah, I was looking at the MRI scans because they're so beautiful these days. You can see everything. And I exactly, and of course I visualize like my spine is damaged, even though doctors said it's normal, a little bit of wear and tear, but for me it wasn't normal. So I did 3 steroid injections, which didn't help at all. I saw physiotherapists, osteopath, I tried massage, acupuncture. Again, nothing helped. And the last thing was a radio frequency denervation.
Oh, yeah.
When they stung your nerves, and it was the worst thing. It didn't help, and I was in more pain after that.
Right.
And I ended up seeing a pain specialist who just prescribed me painkillers. And as you can imagine, all the side effects. So on top of the normal pain and the, side effects from painkillers, my life was hell.
Yeah.
So it helped.
Mm-hmm. And were you, through all this, were you able to carry on working?
Yes, I was able to work. I didn't take time off. I just couldn't afford not to work. I don't have a family here because I live by myself. I immigrated to the UK 13 years ago. So I just relied on myself all my, life here. Yeah. That was another stress because I was so scared to lose my job and at that time to lose my work visa. So of course it didn't help. And, to get support and everything else. Yeah.
And I seem to remember when we were started working, you were working from home much of the time, weren't you? Because you couldn't sit at the desk.
At that time, I was working from home full time, like 5 days a week, and I was working from the floor because I just couldn't sit at all, like I'm sitting right now. I couldn't sit for a minute because it was so painful. I was lying down on the floor, and that's how I worked with my laptop, just somehow.
Yes. And how did you come across this approach?
So after all conservative treatments failed, I started looking for other options because I was desperate. And one interesting fact made me look for other solutions. It just didn't make sense. When I went on holidays, I felt better. And, it just made me think that there must be a reason for that. And also, I knew about mind-body connection. I knew about psychosomatic issues that I've experienced before when I was a child. And of course, I was aware that I'm a perfectionist. I can be hard on myself, and I feel it through my body. So after like a year that I've been suffering from back pain, I started reading different forums about back pain. And I randomly came across Dr. Sarno and his work about TMS. I then started reading his book about TMS. And of course, I had doubts, I had fears, because his book didn't mention a sacroiliac joint. So I thought maybe it's not for me. But anyway, I contacted a TMS doctor in the US, Dr. David Schechter, and he confirmed that I have TMS. I followed his program for a month or two. I've been listening to his CD, lectures, and I've been doing lots of journaling, but I didn't find any improvement.
Right.
So I asked him to recommend me a doctor here in the UK so I can have sort of a real support on a daily basis. And that's how I contacted you. And you were so great because I contacted several TMS doctor specialists, and you replied straight away. And that meant for me a lot. And you sound so positive, it clicked straight away. And we started working together.
So you basically recognize that for many people, yes, reading the books can help them recover. Following the online programs, whether it's ours or David Schechter's or any of them, for many people, that's enough. But you were one of those that actually found that you did need more one-to-one support and guidance, didn't you?
Yeah, I've tried the program with Dr. Schechter. It was great. to begin with, but I realized that I'm not one of those people who recover from TMS once they understand, like one day or overnight recovery, successful stories. It wasn't my case. I knew that I need to go through this with someone like you, Georgie, and it wasn't like a failure, because when you read all these stories when people recover miraculously, and you think, oh, why can't I do the same? And I just realized that's who I am. I'm different. I need support on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I can't do this by myself. That's why working with you and having a Skype session every week, and then the fact that I could email you and text you almost every day, that was something I needed. I've realized that I just surrender,
good for you. Good for you for doing that, because many people just keep thinking if they keep trying the same thing over and over, eventually it'll work. But actually, with all the challenges you faced, even through the program, you learned from all that, didn't you? Right? I so clearly remember working with you, and I know you were facing lots of challenges, but actually each time that is like, if you just get better like that, I don't believe you learn as much. When you are having the dips, as long as you learn from those, then you can really, that helps catapult you further up again as well, and you gain some insights from that, which I know you did.
Absolutely. So, during the program that we've done together, which took me about 6 months, so I don't really remember when I stopped counting days and weeks for my recovery. Recovery happened. But during the program, I discovered how my emotions and stress connected with my pain, and I started journaling about my fears, and just reframing old thoughts about the pain. And it was about rewiring my brain using switching statement, and trying to look at my back as a healthy sort of mechanism, that I don't hurt myself anymore. And I remember we added bit by bit, me starting sitting for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and me starting walking and exercising, swimming. And it was just at the beginning, it was small step, but it was really powerful to believe that everything is okay with my back.
Absolutely. And just before we move on, I just want to say hello to everybody else who's joined us, and to encourage them to ask questions. So if you are listening to Tatyana and you've got any questions for her, then please do put it in the chat box, and then we'll work through those as we're going through. One thing you reminded me of though, Tatyana, I remember so clearly when you began going back to work, part-time in the office at first and part-time at home. And I remember so clearly you were able by then to go to the gym, and you could work out of the gym, but you still couldn't sit down for long. And so you went to work, and there was a room at work, wasn't there, where you, before you started working from home, you were able to go and lie down on the floor in that room to rest from the sitting down that was so painful. And so what I remember encouraging you to do was actually to, when you needed a break, or just to have a break, to go into that room, but not to just lie down, but to actually do some slow breathing, do some emotional awareness, maybe journal or some positive affirmations, that sort of thing, but really beginning to self-soothe you and remind yourself that actually I'm safe, everything's fine. And you managed to do that really well, didn't you?
Yeah, I remember that room when I was at the beginning of, this kind of pain period. I used that room in the office. I think it goes like mother room or something. to lie down because I needed a break. That's what I thought. Otherwise, I would hurt my back. Then you said you can go to the room, but you don't need to lie down because your back is fine. And yeah, I used to just, you know, use it for like looking inwards and you know, acknowledge my emotions, and but not as a like place to lie down. And I think the shifting moment in my recovery was when I managed to break the pain cycle. And it's you know, it's about the conditioned response that I had with sitting. And I remember that day quite well. So you asked me to sit at the desk, not lie down, just try. I was in so much pain and I was really exhausted. And I texted you, I've texted you a couple of times on that day, and I was almost like screaming that I can't do this. I'm so tired. It's impossible. But you supported me. You were like there next to me, and you were saying, it's okay. Just be kind to yourself. It's fine. But you know what? Next day I tried again, and it wasn't as bad. I was in pain, but it wasn't as bad as first day. And then gradually I started sitting more and more and more.
Because I think that the challenges are, actually, before I say that again, any questions, do get on to us so that we can be starting to answer those as well. What happens is that we end up being conditioned. So there's a conditioned response between an activity and having pain, and that belief that that's causing pain, and it becomes linked together, either fear in a position or pain in a position, or all of them. And what happens is that the more fears there are, the more limited your life becomes, because you're less able to do things. And so you really become very limited. And if you want to get over that, it is about gently facing your fears, but initially acknowledging the fears. I know you did that, you know, really acknowledging, expressing the fears, rationalizing. And then actually when you're standing there, sitting, doing something you know usually causes pain, to actually allow yourself to acknowledge and express the emotions, slow breathing, self-soothe, to reassure yourself. And I think, but if you don't make that step, even if it is, like we said, just sit for 5 minutes to begin with, see how you go, but repeatedly do that. Because if you do it for 5 minutes and have pain and stop, that's reinforcing, oh, it's dangerous to sit, so I was right, we mustn't sit because there needs to be pain. So it's about how you can consciously acknowledge, recognize that, but it's about actually deeply accepting it unconsciously. I'm safe, it's okay. And it's only by starting to do things, and there are other things that we can include, like sort of reframing, using visualization, things like that. But it's only by beginning to step into our fears that we can then open our life up to more things.
Yeah, I remember talking to myself a lot, just saying, it's okay. I know you're in pain, but it's okay. For me, yeah, sitting was a big thing, the most challenging. And I constantly told myself, it's okay, you're safe. It's okay, you're safe. Yeah. It was amazing. And then I've used like, I had like an evidence sheet where I put all little successful stories, like 10 minutes sitting or a 15 minutes walk. And whenever I had fears and I thought that I could hurt myself for whatever reason, I just referred to that to sheet. And
not having pain when you were on holiday, that's pretty good evidence there for it not being a physical problem or the pain being less.
Absolutely. And then I started exercising. It was painful. But I knew that I was telling myself, you can't hurt yourself. I know you are in pain. I know, but it's all right. And it's about being kind to yourself, just like
not just pushing yourself into it and being cross and saying, go away, pain.
No,
Recognizing that this is a protective
absolutely.
response. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't like, oh, I hate, to have this other extreme, like, okay, I can do whatever. I hate this pain. I can run. Didn't really work for me. It was about being kind to myself, and even through pain, just acknowledge it's all right. It's okay, but I
think for many people, it would be interesting for them to recognize that you were more fearful of sitting than you were of going to the gym.
Exactly. Sitting was something I would rather stay and lie down. I remember staying as much as possible.
And you can consciously understand that doesn't make sense. But actually, this is deeper than a conscious level. It's all very well reading it and thinking, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But actually, this is more a deeper unconscious, and actually you're unconsciously feeling safe to sit down rather than your unconscious automatically reacting because it perceives this to be a very threatening activity to do, and all the emotions related to that. So while we were working, I mean, I remember working together and you went on your first holiday or you got on the aeroplane. In fact, there were a couple of times you got on an aeroplane the first time and supporting you through that, and you successfully managed that as well. Yeah. And then you were changing jobs. So again, it almost morphed into from being and I always say to people, this is not a program to get rid of pain. This is a personal development program to actually work on you so you don't need pain anymore. And it became much more personal development, over the time, didn't it? About sort of supporting you with how you dealt with the emotions of changing jobs, of moving abroad, of going on holiday, that sort of thing.
Definitely. It took me, as I said, 6 months to recover from 2.5 years of back pain. I now can do everything. I can sit, I can walk, I can dance, I can exercise, which is a big part of my life. And I'm pain-free. It was a life-change experience, which I needed. So I'm grateful to this pain. I've learned a lot that I actually don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be hard on myself. I practice to be kind to myself and appreciate life. So maybe it sounds crazy, but I wouldn't have changed that experience because I needed it. And I've learned so much. I use the tools and the lessons even now.
So do I. Because you know what? Shit happens. And it's about, as it has in the last few months, and it's about having the understanding, awareness, and the tools to use to help us go through challenging times. So often people say that they appreciate all this in the end, and it can be quite hard for people at the early stages or still going through it who really can't understand why people say that they appreciate the lessons that were given to them by going through the pain or appreciate having the pain. But while you were on your program, you were also, of course, dealt with any past unresolved issues, as well as things that were going on currently, didn't you? And you really began to process things, relationships and things going on, and looking at your future and being settled in the UK, etc.
Yeah, lots of things changed. I even, managed to live in Dubai for a while, and that was really scary. I remember I've been asking for your help when I got there. It was for the first time I had to be on a plane for 8 hours, and I was terrified. And of course, when I arrived to Dubai, I wanted to live there for a couple of months to look for a job and probably settle down. I had a flare-up, of course, because I was under so much stress, and you supported me, and I got the control back. I remember that very well. Then I decided to come back to the UK and look for a job here. and it took me some time to find this new job, which I'm so happy to be in. It also it was also stressful, and I had flare-ups, and you supported me.
And I remember you saying when we finished what I had, which is a 3-month program, and I remember you were saying that you felt you wanted additional support, but you felt bad that you needed it. And I remember, you know, we were saying that it's about mentorship, and many people need ongoing support and guidance. And I know you and some others have found that helpful, because you are going to face challenges. And if you're newly into this new life you're living with this new understanding, with so many changes going on in your life, then no wonder any change is stressful. And so it was then about supporting you through when you were triggered, to remind yourself, stay in the moment, you're safe. This is not a real pain, it's just a body memory that's being triggered again. And when you start looking at that, and as your body as being a barometer for how well you're dealing with things in your life, then once you began to really get that on an unconscious level, then you learn to start dealing with stress in a more effective way, and dealing with any triggers that we all have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was also great to realize that actually contacting you is not a failure, or is not something, a sign of weakness, which I thought, you know, from time to time. And, you know, sometimes I would try to figure it out myself. But when I think that actually I need support, and it's okay to acknowledge that there is nothing wrong with that.
Just like, you know, there are business coaches, there are sports coaches, there are musical coaches. You know, this is normal for people. So let's just start answering some of the questions. And Lorraine Ritchie says, do you still get pain if you're stressed or if you're anxious? And if so, what do you do?
So I do have flare-ups from time to time, not as often as it used to be before. And of course, they appear when I'm stressed, when I don't acknowledge my emotions. And the first thing when I feel the pain is, I know this pain so well. I call it my old pain. I sit down and I just tune in, and I start talking to myself. First of all, I acknowledge that it's fine. You don't have to be scared. Like, it's absolutely fine. You've been there before. It's okay. It's not physical. But I now need to understand what's going on, because it's a signal for me to look what happened, for example, yesterday, or what is something that I haven't addressed, you know, with my family, like with my parents or at work. So it's a sign, and I start journaling. And then just accept it. You know, I say, okay, I'm in pain, that's fine. And I don't need to change anything.
Mm-hmm. So there's no fear. I think the difference is there's no fear related to that. And
there's no fear.
Elena later on says, are you 100% pain-free? And I would just say, who is? Because actually this is the mind-body working together. And there's stress around, various things going on. It's more that, you know, everybody will be triggered, because these are, like I said before, in fact, it was over this last weekend, I was on a course with a sensory motor psychotherapist talking, who's a leader in her field, and works with Bessel van der Kolk, who's a trauma specialist worldwide. And something she said was about, you know, I often would get people to rename their pain. Like one lady used to have leg pain, and so she renamed it as lovely pins. So that if a husband said, rather than how's your leg pain, how are your lovely pins, that really lightens it and takes the fear off. We try and get people not to talk about the pain anyway. But this lady was saying she tends to get people to say, it's just a body memory, because body memory is less potent than pain. So even when you're saying, oh, this is just pain, actually the body, the brain sort of perceives pain as being a threat. So it's another way of just sort of saying it in a calmer way. Even I encourage people not to say flare up, because it's a trigger. You've been triggered, or this is a body memory, or whatever, because a flare to some people can be something, if they used it in the past when they were really bad and then they fear going back to that state, then that can trigger them further. But as you say, yes, you're triggered every now and again, but you've no fear. So all of us will have the odds. If I get to the beginning of a headache, for me, maybe I have, maybe there is a whole load of things going on, and I begin to get a headache or maybe a sore throat, I will act. If I was 100% perfect, then of course I wouldn't get that, because I'd be working with my emotions all the time. But I'm not perfect, and occasionally I will be triggered too. But do I say then that, well, I'm 90% better? No, not at all. I just recognize, okay, this is my barometer telling me there's something I need to deal with in my life, which is great. And it's the fear that is linked to the pain that ends up people then becoming much worse. Hence, you're able to acknowledge you have the pain, and presumably pretty soon that pain settles down.
Yeah, so there is no formula. I just have my toolkit. I know what to do, but the key thing is that I don't have any fears. I know that my old neural pathways in my brain have been triggered. That's it's nothing physical, and that's the key thing. Why I can resolve it. Sometimes it takes me 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes me a week. But it's totally fine. It's again, I'm not perfect, and it's just who I am. You know, I look at pain as you said, barometer.
Yeah. And then, you know, and I think the other thing to remember is that when we are triggered in the moment, it's generally not just about what's happening in the moment. It's triggering old emotions, similar experiences, emotions from the past. So therefore, a button pressing moment in this moment could be huge, but actually 90% of it could be just it's re-triggering something from the past, these dormant neural pathways, and it may be similar scenario then triggers that. And therefore, by being able to acknowledge these emotions in the now, we're also deactivating some of that neural pathways from the past as well.
Yeah.
And when you can link that and realize, okay, do you know what? This isn't just about what's going on now. I'm feeling out of control because somebody's done something that I don't like or is different from what I wanted them to do, rather than feeling, when you feel that, because you are somebody who needs to be in control, when you are able to separate that from, okay, all this isn't just what's happening in the moment, it's just that as a child, I had no control over what was going on in my life, and therefore it's triggered this fear within me. And then it's easier to actually process all that as well.
Yeah, that's why journaling is so helpful, because you never know what you can discover when you go inwards.
Yeah.
Amazing. You know, sometimes you can feel like with your body, sometimes I just cry, and it's like, oh, wow, where did this come from?
Absolutely, yes. Okay, so moving on, Carol says, I'm laughing at this because I know the answer to this. Did you have many setbacks during your recovery, Tatyana? And if so, how did you deal with them?
During my recovery?
Yeah, when you were working, especially during that first few months, did you have any setbacks?
Yeah, I was still in, and it wasn't like I recovered one day and I felt pain-free. It was a slow process for me. It took 6 months, and I had setbacks. One day I would feel better, the other day I would feel worse, and yeah, it's just same thing. You know, acknowledge that there is nothing physical happening. Your like my back was fine, and if it was like a bad day, I used to take it easy, just be kind to myself, and but not allow any fears to come.
Although they would at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then you have to work on their fears. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why working with you was important. I needed someone like you. I just need support and guidance.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that quite often, you know, we've lived our whole lives with our personality traits and our behaviors. So it can be quite quite difficult to actually understand how we might have exacerbated whatever stress was going on. Because remember, stress, our perceived stress is maybe, I don't know, 10% of what's happening in our lives, 90% how we deal with it. So often triggers are a thought we've had, or just trying to do something because we feel we should do, but we don't really want to. And those can be really subtle and difficult to understand. And sometimes it's not worth understanding. Sometimes it's about just being in the moment, acknowledging the emotions. But having somebody to reflect back. So I remember on a few occasions, like when you've been on holiday and you had pain on that first flight, and actually on the next appointment, sitting down and actually going through. And that's the aim of this is, okay, you've had a challenge. What happened? What was going on in the lead up to that? What can you learn from that so that it's easier then to come down? Or even if, excuse me, even if you'd resolved the exacerbation of the pain before then, to look at what are the learning experiences from that? What could you have done in the lead up before you were triggered to make maybe you less likely to be triggered? What could you have done in the moment? And what could you have done afterwards? And I think that's the benefit of somebody else being able to feedback to you from what you've said, to explore and say, did you do this and how do you feel about that? Because to you it's normal, it's what you've done for so long, and quite often then it's hard to recognize what maybe you could do differently.
Yeah, no, of course, especially at the beginning when I started adding more activities and like trying to live normal life, something that used to be so simple for me, like playing tennis. I remember, of course, for the first time I played tennis, and even after my recovery, maybe 2 years back, 2 years after my recovery, I played tennis for the first time. And I had a setback, and I contacted you. We had a session, and I remember you encouraged me to go next week and do the same, not to feed this pain cycle, and it went so well, but I had to speak to you.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely fine after that. So of course, I had flare-ups.
And you got back into dancing pretty soon, didn't you? That was one of the first exercises you did because you loved dancing, didn't you?
I remember I missed dancing a lot because it gives me so many positive emotions. I dance, and it was a big thing for me. And I remember we've been talking while I was gradually coming back to dancing. You were there for me, and of course I had pain after dance class, maybe first couple of weeks, but then it got better.
Great. And it was exploring that as well that then helped moving forward. So thank you for your questions so far, everybody. If there are any more, keep them coming. Lucinda, in the meantime, says, if it's not too personal a question, so you don't have to answer this, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
Georgie, can you
did you have any? So yes, did you have any trauma in childhood? Any struggles in childhood? You don't have to answer this, or you can say yes or no if you want.
No, I can answer this question. I had. So I grew up in a family where I had to be really strong, and I'm originally from Ukraine, and I grew up in Soviet Union times. So it was like a typical Soviet family where parents have really high expectations, and there is not much support. And my parents got divorced when I was 12. That was a big trauma, and I think since then, I became really hard on myself in a way that I had to be perfect to make up, I guess, for my parents. So yeah, of course. And I was bullied at school a lot because that's just part of the cultural thing, I guess. So yeah, of course.
And then became a really high achiever as well, didn't you? Again, looking for that approval. That's always, again, a result from childhood.
Yeah. So I had to, like, I've done my law degree back in Ukraine. I got first, then I came here, I did another law degree. And then it was on and on. I couldn't stop, so my pain stopped me.
Yeah.
Really, to just...
Body says no.
Body said no. And the best way I decided to say no was my low back. Otherwise, if it was leg, I would still be doing the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
The back was the best part because I was lying down.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, coming over to the UK, then there's that, like you said before, you were feeling very vulnerable, you were on your own. It's whether you choose to do that or not, there's still a change, and it's settling in with a new job and new where you're living, you're finding friends, and it's not your first language. That's all a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I still don't understand how I did it because I didn't really have support from my family. You know, it's just happened, and it was very vulnerable and challenging to settle down. I think it contributed a lot to pain.
Okay, and Sophie says that she's having 24/7 headaches and neck pain. She says, how do you get back to joy? Is joy maybe key to recovery? I just want to say something first about that if we repress anger and fear and guilt and jealousy and things like that, then it's not just those that get repressed, but actually happiness, hopefulness, joy, peace. You know, it's very hard to just dissociate, okay, well, let's have joy, but not have anger, for example. So it's about learning to become more emotionally aware, acknowledging, expressing some of the emotions that you haven't been addressing, in order that gradually moments of joy start, moments of happiness start. And I know that for you, for example, Tatyana, getting back to dancing was really a big part for you, because that was a way of you gaining some joy. But you didn't, there was no joy at the beginning, was there? And it was about finding, in fact, some of the key ways for people to start improving is when they learn that this is not about, let's just do this, I've got to journal for 10 minutes, I've got to meditate for this, I've got to do this. It's actually about how do we nurture ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Where do we have fun? When do we play? And really having some laughter and fun in our lives. And I've seen many patients where when they recognize that, they let go of the trying to get better, and they start to look at doing things that get them in the flow, for example, or things that maybe they enjoyed when they were younger, but just have dropped. And actually, when they start picking those up and doing things that they really enjoy, that's when they can have moments of joy. But it's about beginning to sort of get to that deeper level and clear out some of the other stuff that's stopping the happiness, joy, peace to surface. What would you say? Do you think so? How do you get back to joy? How did you get back to joy?
That's a really good question, because you know, when I reached my two years of back pain, I was miserable. I was so angry. I was so depressed. I was so tired. I cried every day. But I don't think I was looking for joy. I just surrendered. You know, when I started the program, it was like, okay, there is no pressure of course, I at the beginning, I counted days, I counted weeks and months. It's like, so it's been 2 months and I'm still in pain. What's going on? The other people that I've read stories about, they were in a couple of
So frustrating.
weeks with me. And I was constantly putting pressure, and that was another big mistake. So I remember when I let go, the recovery happened.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't need to expect anything. You don't need to have any goals. You just let go. You acknowledge your work, you acknowledge your emotions, you work like with yourself. And then joy comes, like first swim where, I could just do like strokes and stuff that I couldn't do before, or the flight on the airplane, or playing tennis. There were so many fears, but then just realizing, oh my God, how far I've come.
I think that is part of it as well, is to recognize when you're on your journey and making progress, not to look at the fact I'm not better yet, but actually looking at where have I come from.
Absolutely.
And then you can start seeing the progress, even if it's small. And the other thing that you said a couple of times is the word surrender. And I know you, like many of the people I work with, just cannot understand what I mean when I say surrender. And surrender, or letting go, is actually not having any resistance towards what's happening. It's not surrender to the pain and the pain takes over. It's actually just stop fighting it and just let go, observe what's happening, because then the emotions flow, and they all flow. Nothing stays. The emotions flow, come and go. And if we're allowing that, then that we can begin to start to see the pain starting to settle down. But if we're constantly trying so hard, then we are creating resistance to our own recovery.
Yeah. It's just, when I realized, it took me time during the recovery period that actually I'm different, and whatever it takes, 6 months, a year, 2 years, is fine. So when I let go of trying,
and the time it takes, letting go of it needing to be by a certain time. Yeah. And that's often when we say that progress comes, when they finally do that.
Yeah, and if you ask me when I became pain-free, I don't remember.
Yeah. No, and that's great. Yeah. Oh, well done. Okay, so Sophie says she journals daily, but mostly about negative things like anger and sadness. Would it be helpful to write about positive things too? I don't know what joy feels like anymore. Well, one of the things I'd say, Sophie, is that it's good to acknowledge and express emotions, but if you are constantly going over and over the same stuff without reaching a point where you sit down and rationalize things, put things into perspective, use your evidence sheet, look at it from someone else's point of view, look at what you've learned from experiences that you've had, how, even if that's abuse for some people, okay, it's happened, we can't change that. So acknowledge and express what's happened, but then look at it from any angle you can to start getting more of an understanding, and then actually start looking at what can I learn from this? They must have been have some strength within them to have got through that episode for a start. So it might be have learned to have strength, learned to be more discerning about something, or learn to have boundaries, all sorts of different things. But a lot of times I do speak to people who have been journaling for quite some time, and they are constantly journaling the same day about all the negative things happening in their lives. And we have a negativity bias, and we tend to, primarily, we focus on what's negative, and it's a primal response, it's a protective response, because you can't, in the past, you couldn't have ignored, in primal times, have ignored the leaf rustling in case that was the lion, it was going to eat you. Whereas if you notice it, you can react. But that with the prefrontal cortex and the overthinking brain that we have these days, it creates a lot more stress. And therefore, if we have a negativity bias and we're focusing on that, all those things a lot, the aim is to acknowledge, express, rationalize, put it into perspective, but then look at what you've learned from it. What difference can you make moving forward? And then, yes, write out things you feel grateful for. Note down what, do things that provide glimmers of peace or calm or, complete relaxation to get some balance. So you start sort of tipping the balance of being in the negative all the time to getting a bit more of a positive bias as well. Okay. So Sophie says, I feel constant pressure about getting better from myself, but also others. Everyone's waiting for you to be better. Well, that's a big problem, I'm afraid, Sophie. And I know some people, in fact, one lady very early on when I was working in this field, she came to me with severe symptoms, and her mother would ring her every day to ask her how she was. And this lady was waiting for a specialist appointment. And so I agreed to see her while she was waiting to see the specialist because there was nothing else she could do. She was adamant that she'd read Sarno's book. She said, I've had 3 major stressors going on in the last 18 months. I know this is stress induced. And so she was keen to work with, desperate to work with me. So I agreed to take her on, but we agreed that she would speak to her mum and just say, I'm happy to talk to you every day, but you mustn't ask me how I am, because that's just pulling her down all the time. So I think, again, this is about boundaries and about having some boundaries about, because with this approach, what we encourage is that people don't talk about the pain. In fact, Tatyana, while we were working, what percentage of each call did we actually talk about your pain?
Oh, we haven't talked we haven't talked about pain. We talked about emotions, what triggered the pain.
Yeah, in the process and your behaviors and your personality traits, because
Absolutely.
That's more important than the pain. And the more focus there is on the pain, that's fear-based. And the aim of this whole approach is actually to address that fear and to break those links between everything and the fears. So the more we are careful what we do, how we sit, how we move, where we go because of the pain, the more we are fueling that. And I know that was happening with you as you're smiling away there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on that. When I started the program with you, Georgie, I asked my parents and my friends not to ask me how I feel, not to ask me about my back. I remember I sent like an email or a text message, and I said, my back is fine. Please don't ask me, because it was just so annoying.
Yeah. And this is part of the reason we say talk about body memory or change the name, like lovely things instead of leg pain, and start retraining your brain. If you wake up in the morning, that's the first thing you think of, and actually put some affirmations on straight away, put an interesting podcast on, something to switch immediately. It's not about repressing, it's about learning to tune your brain out of always focusing. So retraining your brain to start focus. And that's why things like following gratitude every day, to really look for things in the day that make you feel grateful for and feel it. Don't just say it, absolutely feel it. Okay.
Yeah.
What I was also going to say to Sophie was, Sophie, I offer free 30-minute calls to have a chat and see if there's anything else that I can advise. So if you want to email me through the website, SIRPA.org, then by all means get in touch, and I'll see if I can help, whether it's giving you some advice then or recommending you see somebody. Okay. So any other final questions? And in the meantime, Tatyana, what difference is your life like now?
Oh my God. Well, you can see clearly that I'm sitting, smiling.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
I think I feel the best where I am in my journey. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have changed anything. I exercise every single day. I exercise in the morning. I like, weights. Mm-hmm. I have my pull-up bar at home. I love pull-ups, chin-ups, and all that stuff.
Just ask you something. If you miss a day, how are you hard on yourself? Or are you okay about saying that's okay?
You know me. No, I missed it. I missed it yesterday because I didn't feel like. I felt low, and it was absolutely fine. And it's another lesson that I've learned, just to accept and love myself. I don't need to be strong and perfect. It's it's an amazing experience. And I wasn't like that before at all. So I love to exercise, but when I don't feel, I never push myself now, never.
Because we all have moods like this. Our, moods and mindset change all the time.
Absolutely. Life is not just one line. And my life, gosh, I'm so active. I
what
run.
are some of the things that you've done now that maybe you've not done before? Is there anything physical that you've done?
Oh, well, I started running. I hated to run.
Okay.
I still don't like it, but it's just the feeling of freedom and feeling my strong body and
brilliant.
Just, I think, I would say I added running for sure.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so just finishing off, well, Dan says, I found this really helpful as a fellow recovery. He did what the first, second Q&A here. So it helps having the approach reinforced and keeps the evidence bucket topped up. Thank you for telling your story. Stephanie says, thank you, Tatyana. That was very useful. I appreciate your time and candor. And Lorraine says, thank you very much. Very helpful. Wishing you well. And just briefly from Sophie, she says, what if you do want to talk about the pain because you want to feel understood? Then actually that in itself is creating a lot of stress because you're trying to convince people and getting them to understand. And it's very hard to do that. And actually, there's too much to talk. We've only got a couple of minutes left anyway. But by doing that, and you're trying to convince people, unfortunately, that does put pressure on yourself, Sophie. So,
yeah, and I can quickly add on that. I during 2 years and 2.5 years, I lost my friends. I was by myself because nobody understood me, and I just stopped. I stopped explaining. It was like, it's fine. I accepted it, and I can do it. I have myself. I have the most important person in my life, and I did it.
And you have your friends now, and yeah.
I have my social life.
Yeah, and you know what? Some people are there that are great to be able to open your heart to. Other people, it might be that they're to help with practical things. There's all, it just depends on friendships, but it's not about. The more we need to explain and be understood and convince people, the harder it's making it for ourselves. So there's more to that, I'm sure. But I think we need to call it to an end now. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We couldn't do this without you because we really do need the questions to be able to ask Tatyana to answer. We will be back in a couple of weeks. And thank you, Tatyana. Thank you so much for spending time. I know it's really helpful for people. All right. Okay. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.